Welcome back, everybody. Back again with a new episode of RP Gibberish. Sadly, this is still not season 2 of RP Gibberish. This is kind of a teaser episode where I will be reviewing the entirety of Final Fantasy 13 2. You all know how crazy I am for Final Fantasy 13 and, of course, the Final Fantasy series in general. I've been playing this game since I picked it up day 1 over the course of about 2.5 weeks. I finished it in about 55 hours. And 2 days ago, I recorded my entire Final Fantasy 13 2 review, which is about 30 minutes long. I thought it would be a great idea to kind of reward everybody for listening and tuning into RP Gibberish and kind of, have my full thoughts on the game a couple of days in advance before I release my review on my Aerodynamics channel. So I hope everybody will enjoy this. Do look out, I talk about some spoilers, so if you don't want to get yourself spoiled, be warned. But I will warn everybody during my review as well. So with that being said, I hope everybody looks forward to that. Let's give a quick update. I know that RPG Swagman is still working very hard on getting his internet connection back. In Australia, internet is definitely not free, so he visits his public library once in a while to check out his messages, but I hope he will be back soon, to talk about the all the games that we've been playing, the JRPGs, that he's been finishing up, and resume season 2 of RP Gibberish. All that I know is he's working very hard on the Wii RPGs, like he finished Skyward Sword, he finished Xenoblade Chronicles, and is in very much anticipating the last story, which I myself included. I hopefully, for both him and me, our limited editions of the last story will be shipped today. Looking very much forward to that game, and until then I have plenty of games, to keep me satisfied. I'm currently playing a lot of Dragon Quest games, and I have already finished about 5 to 10 JRPGs this year, working very hard, to recap, and of course it's very easy to do with a 4-hour commute each day to work. So my 3DS, my DS, and my PSP, and even my iPhone are working overtime, to enjoy a lot of games. In any case, we'll try to be back as soon as possible. Hopefully within a month we will have Season 2 of RPG Gibberish up and running again. Until then, enjoy this teaser episode where I will be giving my full thoughts on Final Fantasy 13 2. Definitely let us know which games you're anticipating in terms of JRPGs. There have been a lot of great news announcements and games, so definitely let us know. And until then, we'll see you next time. Welcome back, everybody, back again with a new video game review, and today it is time to review the latest iteration in my favorite video game series, Final Fantasy 13 2. Now, 13 2 was released back at the end of January and in early February in Europe, so of course I had to pick it up. Picked it up the Crystal Edition day 1 together with the pre-order bonus pack and a collector's guide. Now, if you're interested in checking those items out, definitely check out my earlier unboxing that I released about 2 weeks ago. In any case, I took off a couple of days of works, and after about 53 to 55 hours I completed the entire game, collected all the 160 fragments, and thereby obtained the secret ending. Now, with the downloadable content packs on the way, I will definitely go back and play some more Final Fantasy 13, but at least I finished the main game as much as possible, and for me personally I rank it amongst 100% completion. But the big question remains, of course, where does this Final Fantasy rank in the series for me? Did I really enjoy it? And is it a worthy successor to the first Final Fantasy 13? Which I personally love and ranks amongst my favorite Final Fantasy games together with Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 10, 7, and Final Fantasy 4. Now stick around to find out more. Now the video will definitely talk about some spoilers, and I will discuss the ending of the game in great length. So if you've yet to finish the game, stop watching, pick up the game and play it, because I personally love Final Fantasy 13. It has some issues, but none are so big to stop me from recommending the game to you. If you're a big fan of Final Fantasy, especially Final Fantasy 13, definitely pick up the game. And for those of you still interested in hearing what I have to say about the game, definitely stick around, and we're going to be starting with the story aspect of Final Fantasy 13 2. Now, Final Fantasy 13 2 is one of the few sequels to any numbered Final Fantasy game, and honestly, the sequels have never won any popularity contests. Look at the quite controversial 10-2, as well as the very underrated Final Fantasy 4 The After Years. I've always been a big fan of going back into, the wonderful world that a Final Fantasy game offers. Meeting the characters once again and seeing them in a new journey has definitely been a great thing. So it's definitely great to see 13-2. However, this time around you have different playable characters. First of all, you have Sarah, which is the sister of our previous main character Lightning, and Sarah was not playable in Final Fantasy XIII, as well as the newcomers Noel Kreis and Mog. Now, I've always been a big fan of big character casts in games, so I was a little bit hesitant at first to only have a 2 or actually 3 character party. And sure, gameplay wise, you have a third slot which is reserved for about 100 plus obtainable monsters, but this definitely doesn't come back in terms of story, so I thought it might be a little bit too shallow. But after the opening hours of the game, seeing our main characters starting on their great journey to meet Lightning, who is apparently trapped in Valhalla, which is the realm of the gods, I definitely settled for a small character party. And with the Historia Crux, which is access the time traveling system, I was able to visit a wide variety of different locales over several time periods, and during the course of the game I met some new but also some old characters which were, part of Final Fantasy 13. Now, I've been a big fan of Final Fantasy 13, and I've grown quite attached to the main party, so I was very happy to meet them once again in the game. Now, some have some more screen presence than others, but of course this game is all about the journey of Sarah and Noel, but it is great to see the previous cast, appear in some cameos. And Square Enix is going to be releasing a lot of DLC, and with the upcoming DLC I hope they put some more focus into the old characters and kind of combining both casts. As of now, there's a Lightning and Amadar DLC pack, and if you defeat them, you can add them to your party. And the same is going to be happening for Zaz, which was also one of the characters in Final Fantasy 13. And there's also been hints, at a Snow DLC pack, but I'll get back to that later on. Now, the main story, however, is quite a short tale, and after about 20 to 25 hours or so, I'd already reached the main ending of the game. And that's definitely a surprise. You definitely don't see a lot of very short Final Fantasy games around. But the biggest surprise of them all is, of course, the ending. And the ending is a pretty open-ended ending with one of the biggest cliffhangers that I've ever seen in a game. Now, only games like the Legend of Hero Trails in the Sky series, Metal Gear Solid series, and Kingdom Hearts series are able to end their games on cliffhangers just like this. And honestly, with the a little bit disappointing 1-minute secret ending that even didn't answer a lot of questions. And of course, the ending, in my opinion, is one of the biggest risks I've seen Squaresoft or Square Enix ever taken with the Final Fantasy franchise. I enjoyed the ending for the shock value because I definitely didn't see it coming, but I have one big question with this abrupt ending, and this is, will the questions and will the storyline ever be resolved? And up until now, of course, there is no official announcement of a Final Fantasy 13-3, but with the ending credits ending at to be continued, it's pretty much a safe bet. But you can never be too sure in video game land, where sequels are usually based on good sales. But I really hope for both the Final Fantasy 13 storyline, the Fabula Nova Crystallis, as well as the series history, to see a third game for one of the number titles, and I definitely welcome a Final Fantasy 13-3. Now, I've never been a big fan of cliffhangers in trilogies like games and movies, so I usually tend to dislike the second game because they end up on such a cliffhanger. Now, if Final Fantasy 13-3 would be made, it is definitely a great, potential to continue the fantastic storytelling that they've set up with these both two games, and I think it would be definitely a lot of fun to play because gameplay-wise it's top-notch, which we'll get to later on. But for now, all the fans of the Fabula Nova Crystallis series are left with doubts, questions, and I've also seen a lot of people, with a lot of anger and frustration for Square taking this risk and ending it on a cliffhanger. I'm definitely not against this risky ending, and I definitely welcome it. It can be part of overall great storytelling, but this is only the case if the story comes to full closure in Final Fantasy 13-3. So please, Square Enix, announce the end of the trilogy, not only for the Squaresoft specialists, but also for all those Final Fantasy fans out there. Maybe not for those who've really disliked 13 and 13-2 or part of the Fabula Nova Crystallis series, but I really hope to see a Final Fantasy 13-3. So for now, I'm kind of 50-50 on this ending. So yeah, the story of Final Fantasy 13-2 is short but sweet, definitely ending on a cliffhanger, but it definitely opens up the potential of a fitting end for the 13 trilogy. But of course, how about the gameplay of 13-2? The gameplay mechanics of 13.2 consist of a multitude of additions while building on the core gameplay system of 13. First of all, we have the leveling system in the form of the Crystarium, and it's pretty much been the standard ever since the Final Fantasy X with the Sphere Grid and Final Fantasy XII the License Grid, and of course, the Crystarium in 13. And leveling up at the surface looks very easy. You just level up each individual of the 6 roles. You have the Commando, Ravager, Medic, Sentinel, Saboteur, and Synergist role, and potentially, you can have up to 600 potential levels for each character. Now, you can gain a role bonus if you level up any role of your choice, but if you do this on the bigger nodes, while leaving the smaller nodes for the roles and the stats that you don't really prefer for that specific character. For instance, you can build out and maximize strength for Noble if you use the bigger nodes for just a Commando. And if you use it for Ravager on Sarah, she gets more magic, which of course she's more proficient with. And this stat crunching, can be very addictive, but suffers from one gigantic flaw. Now, the Crystarium system cannot be reset over the course of the game, and whereas in Final Fantasy X you could rebuild the entire sphere grid to your liking, this is not possible in 13.2, except for replaying the entire game and planning out the entire Crystarium before you use it on your nodes. And I only realized this level of depth with the small and bigger nodes about 10 hours of gameplay when I already maxed out the Commando and Ravager roles, and it would have definitely been a nice option to reset the entire Crystarium pretty much at the end game. I also had about 500,000 of leftover Crystarium points unable to use because I was already at max level. So for those out there still having to play the game, definitely keep that in mind. It doesn't bother you in the long run because you still pretty much get the same stats, but you can potentially max out your game and make your life even more easier towards the end game on some very hard optional bosses. Now, moving on to another big change in the gameplay is of course the ability to obtain monster crystals and use them in the third slot of your party. Now, this has of course been seen for years now in Pokemon and the Shin Megami Tensei series, which I'm a big fan of, and it's definitely, in my opinion, a welcome addition to the Final Fantasy world, and I really enjoyed it. Being able to obtain different colored chocobos, which this time around there are about 8 different colored chocobos, as well as 6 different kinds of Cactuar. My trusty friend was definitely happy to see a female version of Cacturina in a game. But you can also, find monster crystals in the wild as treasures. Throughout with the DLC, you're even able to unlock, Amadar, Lightning, and Sass. So it's definitely a great gameplay choice to kind of mix it up with the monsters. Now, each individual monster has one of the 6 roles attached to it, and you can level these up with monster materials that you can get as loot in battles, find in treasure, or buy in shops. So this is a little bit different since you don't level them up by using them in battle with the Crystarium points. But each monster has its own Crystarium, and the system of building up the best set of monsters definitely warrants some very deep gameplay and a lot of maximization for potential completionists. But throughout the game, I only focused on a handful of monsters, definitely going for quality over quantity. And while at the end of the game, I had about 75 plus monsters and wasn't even close to catching them all, I only had about 10 or so that I really leveled up. I can definitely make recommendations for a Sentinel, which is the Pulsework soldier that you find in the start of the game, and I've pretty much kept him around throughout the end of the game. For the Commando, I kind of switched positions between a very cool golden chocobo as well as a monster called Kichu. And finally, I unlocked Amadar, which is the DLC character for the Commander role. And finally, I had Flanator and Kate Sid do their job as a medic. Now, I finished the entire game 100%, but I didn't even bother with the other 3 roles for the monsters. Now, the game also offers Monster Infusion, where you can add specific bonuses and or skills from one monster to the next, kind of like the demon fusing in the Shin Megami Tensei series, which even makes creating the most insane monster pack even bigger. However, I had not once used this option throughout the entire game, and I was still able to slaughter the hardest optional bosses like downloadable content Omega, Lightning and Amadar, as well as the main game Yomi, which is definitely one of the harder bosses. But the hardest of them all is the Paradox Scope Caius Ballad in Void Beyond. Definitely one of the harder bosses, and if you ever get around to beating him, definitely know and be max level, because he is really hard. But in any case, this makes me definitely wonder what Square Enix has in store for completionists and endgame specialists like myself. Always been a big fan of Final Fantasy for their insane added content at the end of the game, for potential max stats and stuff like that. I've always been a big fan of that, but Final Fantasy 13 felt a little bit shallow and wasting the potential depth of this fantastic gameplay system with the monsters. Now, battles themselves expand on the great foundation of Final Fantasy 13. Staggering enemies is just as fun. Creating a good paradigm pack without having to micromanage your moves in a battle is a great change for, a JRPG expert like myself. I'm pretty much playing one or two JRPGs after another, and it can definitely get a little bit tiresome, selecting attack or cure fight after fight. And 13 and 13.2, they automatically do that for me. I more so dictate the flow of a battle, choosing my paradigms, going for the stagger, and once I have a nice stagger build up, I go for the kill. Now, this battle system, might still be a love or hate affair for some, but I personally love it. Some might find it too easy, but definitely go for it, playing it on a normal mode and trying to go for the optional bosses. And it's definitely a great, battle system. I really love it. And this time around, they added a feral link, which acts as a limit break for your third character in your party, the monster, so you can even become even more kill heavy. Now, something that I saw recur quite often in reviews are the small temporal rifts puzzles, and these puzzles are honestly not such a big part of the gameplay. You meet these puzzles in the first hours of the game, and they were also shown off in a demo where you have to solve these puzzles, and there are 3 different types of these temporal rift puzzles, but honestly, for me personally, they didn't recur until all the way at the end of the game, where 2 optional worlds in the form of Urba 300 AF and 400 AF, where you had to do these puzzles once again. So only for those hardcore fragment collectors you will run into these temporal rift puzzles. Now, it's definitely nice to see Square add some minigame bonuses, which of course we're definitely lacking in Final Fantasy 13. But besides the temporal rift puzzles, the same goes for Serendipity, which kind of acts like the gold saucer of 13.2. This time around, there's chocobo racing and a really nefarious and devilish slot machine, which are available for use. And of course, with the impending SAS DLC pack, there will be 2 more minigames added, and I hope this will be a lot of fun. But honestly, I really hope that Square Enix will reintegrate a minigame, like Triple Triad throughout the entire journey. It was always a lot of fun, in Final Fantasy 8 and 10, to kind of break up the storytelling with saving the world, and for a minute just play a card game or a blitzball game with someone on the streets, or Triple Triad with one of your characters. But nowadays, the mini games feel kind of tacked on, and honestly, they're only necessary for gaining 5 fragments out of the 160. And if you focus on getting a lot of gil, you can just buy 4 of the 5-1, which leaves the very very evil lucky coin fragment, which you have to get on the slot machines, which is, the slot machines are rigged. All I can say that definitely don't waste a lot of time. Do what I did. I just taped down my controller with a piece of tape on L1 button, autoplay. You'll get it yourselves, because that's definitely one evil fragment to get. So let's see. Those are the mini games, and I'll definitely look forward to the card games. Let's see. There's also the gameplay with the Historia Crux itself. You have a big grid. Travel to about 40 different worlds. Locales and timelines mixed in, and it's quite interesting because there are a lot of side quests, getting items from one timeline to the next one, which is definitely a lot of fun to figure out and kind of get all the fragments. There's also the option to close a time gate and replay the entire world, which I didn't really use until the end game, where I only used it to get the potential paradox endings, which are kind of different endings. And honestly, they're kind of a mixed bag. Some add more depth than other paradox endings, but it's definitely a nice, interesting thing to do, seeing all the potential endings. But some are really lackluster. But of course, it is a requirement for getting all the secret endings by having the paradox ending be part of the 160 fragments. Now, honestly, the only thing that was reduced from Final Fantasy 13 was the weapon building, which honestly was a bit too much in the previous game. I still have to this day not completed Final Fantasy 13 100%, where you needed to farm upwards of 50 million gil and get a lot of monster materials by defeating the hardest enemies in the game to basically build level 3 max weapons. And this was definitely scaled back in 13.2, where the most of the best weapons were available as treasures and side quest rewards, but there are still some weapons in the game that you could only get by, getting monster materials and getting a lot of gil. Once again, there was one thing that I didn't complete, and that was, it would have been nice to unlock the 6-bar ATB weapons, because there are two abilities which basically act as Sarah and Noel's limit breaks, but you could only get these 6-bar ATB weapons through getting that one weapon, and that's something that I haven't done yet, so I might go back and check it out. Now finally we have these cinematic actions, which act basically as your quick time events and give you extra treasures in the form of adornments, small items to personalize your monsters, which is definitely a nice addition but not the most noteworthy. Although it was definitely cool to add a afro with a chocobo chick, to a cactuar, which is, in my opinion, is really cool. The game, by the way, also offers an easy mode, which I never used myself. The game is pretty easy if you're proficient with paradigm shifts and staggering. Let's see, if there is one final gameplay nitpick that I would have, is that out of all the worlds and timelines that you can visit, pretty much all of them take place after the end of Final Fantasy 13. So a lot of people talk about, going to the past and the future, but honestly all the worlds take place in years which the game dubs as after fall, and it's the fall of Cocoon at the end of Final Fantasy 13, and all these worlds take place in about 3 years after fall up until 700 after fall, but there are no worlds with before fall, so I don't know if this was intentional, and I'm definitely looking here at Final Fantasy 13-3 if that ever gets made. But I would have been, it would have been great to, visit Grand Pulse and also Urba, in the time where Fang and Vanille were running around, pretty much the war of transgression that's talked about quite often in the game. But I'm sure Square is holding that wild card, until Final Fantasy 13-3 gets along. So let's see. Gameplay-wise, Final Fantasy 13 has so much things to talk about. I even haven't talked about the addition of 15 fragment skills, which were definitely nice as well. By collecting more and more fragments, you get rewarded in serendipity by gaining them. And these skills range from a faster and further Mach throw. I didn't even forget to mention that you can throw Mach, to get treasures on the world map and stuff like that, which is a nice thing. But you can get fragment skills like shop discounts, or even playing the game in battles in twice speed and instant kill, random encounters. All these, these come quite late in the game, but the fragment skills were definitely a nice addition to the game. Finally, there is, however, one final change to the gameplay system, and that is the random encounters together with the Mach clock. Now, the random encounters are semi-random encounters. You walk around the locales and environments, and monsters just appear out of nowhere on the map, and simultaneously a clock and kind of a ring with the area of attack appear. Now, you can choose to run away, but you might get followed by enemies, or you can opt for a preemptive attack by hitting the X button and attack the monsters within a given time. Now, this is a very interesting system and rewards players for being proactive. But I have, however, one big complaint, and besides the open ending of the game, this is probably my biggest issue with the game, and that's the fact that monsters almost always appear behind you. So you're just walking down an area, you have to turn around and then attack them. And it doesn't even make sense, in a real world setting. How can you just get attacked by a place you just walked over? But it's a very annoying issue, and it's weird, because Final Fantasy 12 didn't have this, this encounters, at your backside issue. I hope that if there is a potential Final Fantasy 13-3 and they implement, this random encounter system again, they make it so that enemies appear, about 10 meters in front of you instead of having to switch around every time. And together, like I said, with the open ending of the game, which is still 50-50, these are the two biggest issues that I personally had with the game. But like I said, nothing game breaking. So that's pretty much about it on the world of Final Fantasy 13. Of course, the wonderful gameplay. There are some excellent additions to the gameplay, great use of monster, catching and stuff like that. And they already had a great foundation with Final Fantasy 13 in a battle system. And it's definitely a great improvement, except for the one issue that I just mentioned. It of course leaves us with a presentation of the game, which is of course always one of the highlights of a Final Fantasy game. And the game looks absolutely fantastic, and especially the area design is spectacular. At this time, the game offers a wider variety of locales and settings, so the range and level design is even more impressive. From the wonderful futuristic world of Academia to the weather-changing Arcueil steppe, all the areas look excellent. Let's see, we also have characters and voice acting, which is definitely top-notch once again. Feels very realistic, and I just absolutely love, being part of the Final Fantasy 13 world, getting sucked in, with the characters. The soundtrack of Final Fantasy 13 is already among some of my favorite soundtracks of the last generation, and I listen to it on a regular basis. And Final Fantasy 13 2 kind of works on that foundation. Definitely seeing some tracks return from the original game. Definitely my favorite track from the original soundtrack, Dust to Dust, returns as well. And of course, they add in some new tracks. It's definitely more new tracks than old tracks, by the way. But this time around, I do have some question marks at some tracks. Now, I'm not a big fan of this particular style of music, but one is a boss theme, and another one is a particular Red Chocobo tune. Both of them are completely out of sync with the rest of the soundtrack, and they're pretty much heavy metal based, and that's definitely not my preferred style of music. Something weird though is that later on in the game you can unlock a fragment skill, which enables you to choose the Chocobo track to your liking out of 4 or 5 potential Chocobo songs, and this is definitely probably reaffirming that somebody at Square Enix thought that the heavy metal Chocobo track was just way too obnoxious as well, but they just decided to keep it in there, but also add the option to just take it off. But overall, the soundtrack is excellent, and Masashi Hamauzu proves to be a worthy successor to Nobuo Uematsu. Of course, I would love to see Mr. Uematsu return to the Final Fantasy series, but we'll see if that ever happens. But overall, a top-notch production by Square Enix. However, with the both the content of the game and especially the end game content, which is kind of lacking, some small hiccups, in the frame rate, and of course the already pre-planned downloadable content, I can't help but feel that the game is a little bit rushed. Of course, it was made within 18 months, which is an impressive feat. And of course, Final Fantasy 13 took about 4 years to create, but kind of felt a little bit rushed, and you could kind of see that in some of the scenes. But overall, top notch. So yeah, what else is left to say about Final Fantasy 13 2? Over the course of about 55 hours, I had thoroughly enjoyed my time with the game. It was an excellent follow-up to the original game, expanding the already fantastic gameplay systems and offering more variety this time around. Personally, the linearity of 13 was never an issue with me. I finished it pretty much in a week time, and I absolutely loved, the segmented storytelling with the characters and such running around and pairing up. But honestly, the non-linearity of Final Fantasy 13-3 never outstays its welcome as well. Now, story-wise, 13-2 takes a lot of risks by offering an unfinished storyline, opening up a potential sequel, and being pretty short. But if Final Fantasy 13-3 reaches my doorsteps in about a year and a half, 2 years' time, I'll probably have nothing to complain about. But honestly, if Final Fantasy 13-2 is the final time that I explored the depths of Grand Pulse and Cocoon, I will definitely be seriously disappointed and overall let down by Final Fantasy 13-2. Now, 13-2 also implements a little bit too many mechanics that you can see by the length of this video. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and all these different mechanics, some are used more frequently than others, some are implemented in a better way. So like the monster infusion, chocobo racing, and weapon building, it might have been a little bit too much all in one, but I definitely hope that in a potential sequel, Square decides to keep what works, like the battle system, like the monster recruitment and such, and just build on those foundations without getting out of control with all the different mechanics that are available in the game. But like I said, I was able to get all the fragments, beat all the optional bosses without using some of these mechanics, which definitely makes me wonder why or if Square Enix rushed the endgame completionist content. But I definitely hope that further downloadable content packs add some story elements to it, see some more cameos of old characters, but also add in those max stat required bosses like Yasmat of Final Fantasy 12 or even Final Fantasy VIII Omega Weapon, which definitely makes me put in that extra effort in getting all those fantastic weapons, building up an insanely powerful monster stock. But like I said, with the already promised and SAS DLC, potential Snow Colosseum DLC that's hinted at the story, I definitely will go back to playing 13.2, if not for the fact that I've still yet to obtain Lightning as a monster crystal in my party. Now, all in all, a wonderful addition to the main Final Fantasy series, and I hope the downloadable content packs will only make the wait for Final Fantasy 13.3 more bearable if 13.3 is even on Square's agenda. So please, Square Enix, this is the Squaresoft specialist speaking. Thanks for this wonderful game and setting up a potential and fantastic trilogy, but definitely don't leave us hanging around in suspension and announce it with a wonderful teaser, just the way that you teased the Kingdom Hearts sequels. Now, to all interested in 13.2, if you finished 13, definitely go ahead and pick up a copy. It is an excellent sequel, but will the game convert, the non-believers who really dislike 13? That kind of depends on what you're looking for. There are more locales and there's less linearity, so if you dislike that about 13, you will probably enjoy 13.2 a lot more. But if you're already, a non-believer in terms of the gameplay system with the staggering and the paradigm shifts, this game I don't think that this game will, sway your opinion on it. But, check out the demo after hearing my review, if you're still unsure on picking it up. In any case, I love 13.2, and I hope everybody enjoyed this review. So it might have been a pretty long, but I just wanted to cover all the aspects of the game. Now, if you've played this game yourself, definitely let me know what you thought of the game. But for now, I will be, waiting on the downloadable content packs, kind of delving into 13.2 a little bit more, and hoping that the end of the trilogy in the form of Final Fantasy 13.3 will be announced hopefully at E3 2012. But in all means, in a few days I will be enjoying what might actually be a true sequel to the Final Fantasy franchise, and that is The Last Story for the Wii, which is of course the newest game by the original mastermind behind Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi. I'll definitely keep everybody updated on Twitter how I like The Last Story, and definitely will have a full review once I finish that. But in any case, this wraps up my Final Fantasy 13.2 review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the game. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next time.